In the summer of 1878, the Colorado sun cast its golden hues over the rugged landscape, the serenity of Black Creek providing a sense of solace in an otherwise harsh world. Within this wild expanse, Tala lived alone, her days marked by the rhythms of nature. Her isolation was a chosen solitude, a refuge from the world that had taken so much from her. Tala's life was a quiet study in resilience, a testament to her unyielding spirit. Her connection to the land was profound. The earth was her sustenance, and the sky was her sanctuary. Tala's mornings began with the soft light of dawn peeking over the distant hills. As she gathered herbs and roots, her fingers deft and sure, the land spoke to her in the rustling of leaves, the trickling of the cricket's whispers, a language she understood more than any spoken word. Yet, despite the peace she had forged in this solitude, there lingered an unshakable memory of her past, a spectre of her lost tribe, forever shadowing her heart. On one such morning, fate intervened in Tala's solitary existence. She found herself by the creek, her senses attuned to the symphonies of nature, when she noticed something unusual in the distance. A strange, cumbersome figure lay crumpled beside the water's edge. As she approached cautiously, her heart quickened, recognizing the blue coat of a cavalryman. Blood stained the ground beneath him, a stark reminder of histories and harms she wished to forget. James was a survivor of a recent skirmish, one that left him wounded and disoriented. His regiment had been ambushed, and he was separated, the chaos of battle scattering them like leaves in a storm. With no sense of where he was, or how far he had traveled, he had staggered until exhaustion consumed him, collapsing by the creek that now promised salvation or demise. Tala's instinct urged her to leave, but something held her gaze. Perhaps it was the vulnerability of the man before her, a stark contrast to the monstrous image she had long painted of soldiers like him. His face, though marred by sweat and dirt, bore no cruelty but a human fragility. Despite her better judgment, the part of her that was healer before warrior stirred within, compelling her to act. Moving deliberately, she approached James, her footsteps light upon the grass. His eyes fluttered open, panic setting in briefly at the sight of an unknown figure looming above him. But the pain was blinding, and any fight left within him withered as quickly as it had flared. Tala knelt beside him, her presence both a comfort and an enigma. They were worlds apart, their differences as vast as the sky above. Without a shared language to bridge the chasm, Tala relied on her actions. Gently, she examined his wounds, her touch efficient and without malice. As she tended to him, James registered not only her care, but the profound caution in her eyes. Days passed, time slipping through the forgiving embrace of twilight into dawn, bringing with it an unspoken truce. James remained in a haze of grateful disbelief, his recovery painstakingly slow. Tala, resolute yet contemplative, found herself interpreting his expressions, the pain and eventual gratitude that flickered across his features like shadows. Each day brought a new challenge, a silent communication, as Tala imparted her knowledge in rudimentary teachings. James's eyes followed her movements as she showed him how to clean a wound with herbs, how to recognize the songs of different birds, their meanings etched in the fabric of survival. It was, in many ways, a dance of understanding, a language formed between them that no words could articulate. As the sun set behind the mountains each evening, painting the sky with colors both vibrant and muted, Tala and James found themselves seated by the fire, sharing meals that spoke of sustenance and the humble reality of life in the wilderness. Their mirrored silence was no longer heavy with suspicion. It was an acknowledgement of shared space and the fragile thread of mutual existence. In those quiet moments under the canopy of stars, Tala's memories would flood back, unbidden yet persistent. She would think of her family, her tribe, the laughter and stories that once filled her life. Where had they gone? What fates had befallen them in the turmoil brought by men like James? She saw the echoes of those questions mirrored in his eyes, a hollowness born from battles fought, dreams shattered. Yet, paradoxically, each passing day offered more than fleeting despair. It was as if the land, with its vast and untamed beauty, called for rebirth, for redemption. In Tala, James saw an unlikely savior. In James, Tala glimpsed the possibility of healing a world fractured by conflict. Their story was only just beginning along the banks of Black Creek, where nature's whispers carried the secrets of old grievances and the promise of new beginnings. As they stood on the precipice of understanding, the weight of history did not vanish, but it lightened an ephemeral dance in the expansive silence of the West. hinting at a future that transcended the primal echoes of survival. Tala approached the injured cavalryman with caution, her heart a symphony of conflicting emotions. James lay by the banks of Black Creek, his breathing shallow, one leg wrapped in a bloodied bandage that had seen better days. Beneath the blazing Colorado sun, the scene was eerily serene, a stark contrast to the chaos that had brought him here. Kneeling beside him, Tala studied his face, dust-covered and lined with pain. It was the visage of a man far from his own land. The uniform he wore was a bitter reminder of the soldiers who had raided her village years ago, leaving nothing but ashes and echoes. But here now, this man was not a soldier. He was a person in need. Her instincts, shaped by years of tending to her own, took over. She moved with quiet efficiency, fetching water from the creek and tearing strips of cloth from her own garments to replace his dirty bandages. As she cleaned his wound, he flinched, eyes fluttering open, revealing a startling shade of blue. "Easy," she murmured, her voice soft and steady. Though her words were foreign to his ears, the tone was universal, gentle and reassuring. James tried to speak, but his voice was a rasping whisper. "Thank you." She nodded, understanding his gratitude. Tala offered him a sip of water, helping him to lift his head slightly. Their hands brushed accidentally, and both withdrew momentarily, before Tala resolved to hold firm. Though communication was a challenge, the need for survival forged its own silent language. In the days that followed, Tala fell into a routine. She began her mornings checking James's condition, foraging for food, and ensuring they remained hidden from prying eyes. James, in turn, watched her with a quiet respect, occasionally gesturing with a smile or a nod as she worked. Slowly, over shared meals and silent evenings by the fire, they constructed a rudimentary languagey mix of expressions and gestures, blending English, tribal signs, and the unspoken communication of intent gazes. James would point to himself and say, "James," and after a few repetitions, Tala understood this was his name and mimicked the gesture, pointing to herself and saying, "Tala." As the familiarity grew, so did the trust. Tala began to see glimpses of James's world through his attempts to draw in the dirt drawings of horses, the horizon, and stars illustrating stories of his life, his travels, and the landscapes he had crossed. She listened, nodding or frowning, responding with her own tales, her fingers painting pictures of mountains, rivers, and the buffalo that once roamed them. Despite the cultural and language barriers, their exchanges became lessons in empathy and understanding. By the firelight, James began to teach Tala simple words, pointing to objects and enunciating slowly. He was patient and careful, offering her a chance to explore his world, while slowly unraveling the complexities of hers. When Tala finally mimicked her first English word, the approval in James's eyes was unmistakable, a small victory in their mutual journey. For Tala, the experience was bittersweet. She was rebuilding fragments of connection she'd lost, mixing the ashes of old resentments with the clay of new beginnings. In tending to James, she found a quiet solace, a purpose beyond her own survival. Her thoughts wandered often to her lost tribe, imagining how they might have reacted to her unusual alliance, and she hoped they would understand. James, on the other hand, found his guarded perception of the world slowly transforming. For years, he had seen only enemy lines, yet Tala's kindness was an undeniable force, erasing black and white outlines with the vibrant colors of humanity. As his strength returned, he knew he was indebted to the woman who had shown him the depth of selfless care. As spring turned towards summer, the landscape around them flourished. Black Creek sang with the chorus of renewal, echoing the unspoken metamorphosis between Tala and James. With his injuries healing well, they ventured further each day, exploring the area, gathering provisions, and holding wordless conversations beneath the vast sky. Their newfound partnership extended beyond the realm of language. Tala taught James survival skills, how to listen to the wind, watch animal trails, and find nourishment in the wild. James, in return, offered her his knife, teaching her how to use it effectively, a symbol of trust and equality. But even in this time of peace, shadows coiled at the periphery of their thoughts. Tala recalled the distant smoke plumes that heralded raids, while James dreamt of cavalry marches and hooves pounding against the earth. These memories, raw and jagged, refused to be silenced. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow across the landscape, Tala and James sat by the creek. Tala pointed to the west and said, "Sunset," echoing one of James's teachings. James smiled, trying in turn to mimic one of her tribal chants he had heard in snippets over the weeks. Their laughter, a rare sound amid the solemn backdrop of their lives, rang out, startling a nearby bird into flight. In that moment, their connection transcended the ghosts of past conflicts. They realized that the bridge they had built was stronger than they had imagined. In the quiet that followed, Tala reached for James's hand. Her touch was tentative, a question lingering in the twilight air. In response, James squeezed gently, an acknowledgement of the silent vow taking shape between them, an unspoken agreement to face the future, whatever might come, as allies. Little did they know, this fragile peace would soon be tested, with approaching whispers threatening to unravel the tapestry of redemption they were weaving. But for now, under the wide expanse of the night sky, Tala and James clung to the hope that healing, however slow, was indeed possible. The sun cast long shadows over the rugged landscape of Black Creek, slicing through the wilderness like shards of memory that refused to be forgotten. Days turned into weeks as Tala and James worked side by side. The initial wariness had been replaced by a tentative trust, but the specter of the past loomed ever larger. Tala was haunted by memories of her tribe, the Arapaho. She could still picture her father's stern face, the way he stood proud in ceremonial dress, the dances under the expansive sky that bound them to nature and each other. But those dances were a distant echo now, drowned out by the thundering hooves of cavalry horses and the smoke of gunfire. The pain was a relentless ache in her heart, a reminder of what she had lost. James, too, was no stranger to ghosts. His dreams were colored with the vivid reds of battlefields, the cries of fallen comrades and enemies blending into a cacophony of anguish. He was just a boy when he joined the cavalry, hoping to find glory and honor in the ranks. Instead, he found only the terrible weight of guilt and sorrow, a burden he carried like a scar beneath his uniform. As they eked out their existence beside the creek, their routines developed a rhythm. Tala would venture into the forest to gather herbs, her knowledge of healing a balm for both their physical and spiritual wounds. James, his injuries slowly mending under her care, would fish or attempt to mend their makeshift shelter, his gratitude unspoken but deeply felt. The language barrier lingered, yet their gestures were poetry in motion, each glance and nod developing a language of its own. But just as the landscape offered moments of tranquility, it also brought tales carried by the wind whispers of approaching men on horseback, moving with the purpose of reclaiming what they believed to be theirs. It was early evening when James first noticed the signs, a plume of dust on the horizon, the distant sound of hoofbeats, like a drumbeat of impending doom. His heart quickened, not from fear alone, but from the realization that the fragile sanctuary he had discovered with Tala was under threat. "They're coming," James said, pointing towards the horizon. His eyes met Tala's, conveying what words could not: a plea, an apology, a promise of solidarity. Tala's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in contemplation. She nodded, understanding the unsaid. The echoes of her tribe's destruction felt closer now, conjured by the sight of a cavalry, potentially like the one that had brought her so much pain. There was no time for hesitance. Tala moved with the grace of a river, gathering her few belongings with decisive swiftness. James followed her lead, the silent pact between them growing stronger with every step. As they fortified their modest dwelling, the weight of survival fell evenly on both their shoulders. That night, the air was tense, filled with an electric energy, a prelude to the storm they both knew was coming. They sat together by the meager fire, its flickering light sharing space with the darkness in which their pasts dwelt. Tala reached into her pouch, withdrawing a talisman, a small bundle tied with leather, filled with sacred herbs. She offered it to James. "Protection," she said, her voice a gentle ripple in the stillness. He accepted it with reverence, the gravity of her gesture settling deep within him. It was more than a charm. It was her trust, her acknowledgement of the shared path they now tread. In the quiet, James finally spoke of his own past, his words stumbling at first, then flowing with the release of confession. He spoke of his family's struggles, the way the uniform had seemed an escape, and the bitter irony of finding himself perpetuating the suffering he had sworn to escape. His voice was a quiet lament, carried over the embers like a prayer for absolution. Their hands brushed briefly, a touch that tethered them to the present, holding darkness at bay. They remained vigilant through the night, the boundaries between them dissolving like mist in the face of their mutual resolve. At dawn, the riders arrived. The soldiers, 4 of them, hardened by war and weariness, halted at the sight of Tala standing beside James. Her posture was a defiant line in the sand, a challenge etched into the earth. They saw only an enemy, their instincts honed in decades of conflict. "Step aside," the leader of the group commanded, dismounting his horse with a practiced arrogance. James raised his hands in a gesture of placation. "We seek peace," he said, his voice calm but unyielding. Tala's gaze burned like embers, her resolve as solid as the mountains around them. She had known too much loss, and while fear threaded through her veins, it was overshadowed by a fierce determination. "Leave," Tala said, her voice steady, her eyes never wavering. The soldiers hesitated, uncertainty flickering on their faces. Here was not the enemy they had envisioned, but people, flesh and blood, encumbered by neither guilt nor justice that history had imposed on them. The tension crackled like lightning poised to strike, yet it was the silence that ultimately spoke the loudest. For reasons known only to the wind and stars, the men turned away. Perhaps they saw something in Tala's unwavering stance, or James's silent plea. Perhaps they were tired of the battles that offered no victory. As they rode back into the horizon, the peace of Black Creek settled back into place, fragile yet firm. With the retreating hoofbeats, Tala and James exhaled the breath they had been holding. In that moment, they stood as equals, united not by shared blood or heritage, but by the acknowledgement of their shared humanity. In the aftermath, neither spoke of victory or defeat. They knew the shadows of the past would remain, creeping at the corners of their consciousness. Yet in each other, they discovered a light strong enough to hold them at bay. The sun rose higher, warming the earth and their faces, shedding light on a new day filled with unspoken promises. Together, they would forge a path unknown, a testament to the timeless resilience of redemption. The late afternoon sun dipped behind the jagged peaks of the Rockies, casting long shadows over the clearing by Black Creek. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that comes before a storm. Tala and James stood side by side, a bond forged in silence and necessity, each aware of the imminent danger closing in like a tightening noose. Tala's heart beat with the rhythm of the earth beneath her feet, steady and relentless. The gun felt foreign in her hands, an instrument of pain and death, yet it carried the weight of survival. Her fingers brushed over the cool metal, the sensation both a comfort and a curse. Memories flooded her people, her home, the laughter of children echoing through the village, a life torn apart by men like James. Yet, she glanced at him now, saw the determination etched into his features, and felt a kindred spirit, however unexpected. James, on the other hand, was a man on the edge. The uniform he wore was tattered, representing duty and conflict, yet it hung loosely, as if it no longer fit the man he had become. He had seen enough blood, enough pain to fill lifetimes, but Tala had shown him another side of humanity, one, he thought, lost in the bloody trenches of past skirmishes. Her care, her silent strength, had been a balm to his wounds, both visible and hidden. He owed her his life, and he was determined to prove that though he had been part of her people's suffering, he could stand with her to face this threat. The wind carried the distant sound of hoofbeats, sharp, deliberate. Tala and James exchanged a look of understanding. Their pursuers were near, men who would bring violence and rage, shattering the fragile peace they had created in this secluded sanctuary. Tala crouched low, her eyes scanning the horizon, searching for movement among the trees. She had learned the language of the forest long ago, the whispers of the wind through the branches, the secrets held in the rustle of leaves. She could feel the land's energy, guiding her, grounding her in the present. James was at her side, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, a gesture of solidarity. "We need to move to higher ground," he said, his voice a low murmur, laced with urgency. His eyes met hers, a silent plea for her trust. Together, they traversed the rocky terrain, each step calculated and in sync, the trail leading them to a ridge overlooking the creek. From here, they could see the expanse of the land, the path their enemies would take, undeniable against the backdrop of nature's vast beauty. It wasn't long before figures emerged from the woodland edge, shadows against the fading light. Armed men, for in total, moved with predator-like precision across the landscape. Tala felt a surge of anger, a visceral response to the intrusion. They were unwelcome, disruptors of the sanctuary she'd found, of the fragile bond she'd forged. James breathed deeply, centering himself. He understood this fight was not just physical. It was a battle for redemption, for proving that change was possible. "They'll expect us to run," he whispered, looking at Tala. "Then we won't," Tala replied, her voice firm. As the men drew closer, their voices loud and brash, Tala positioned herself at the ridge's edge, her stance unwavering. James knelt beside her, rifle steady, eyes sharp. It was a moment of truth, one that peeled away the veneer of past enmities and exposed raw determination. The first shot rang out, shattering the evening's silence. It was a warning, a declaration. Tala's aim was precise, a testament to her skill. The men hesitated, recalibrating their approach. Surprise widened their eyes, the acknowledgement of a worthy adversary who stood defiant and unyielding. James followed suit, his shot grazing the earth near their feet, a warning of his own. The distance was their advantage, empowering them with the element of surprise and superior positioning. Each shot was taken with precision, designed to delay, to impose hesitation and disorder. The approaching men responded with gunfire, bullets crackling through the brush, clipping branches, embedding into the ground with lethal intent. Tala and James ducked low, using the ridge as cover, their hearts pounding in unison with the crescendo of violence. Amidst the chaos, Tala's mind drifted to her people, to what they had endured. This fight was not just for survival, but for her ancestors, for a future free from the tyranny of past grievances. She focused, her spirit melding with the earth's resilience, guiding her hands and her heart. Beside her, James felt the weight of his own history, the legacy of warriors bred for battle, and a deep-seated longing to be more than the scars he'd accumulated. Tala's resolve fueled him, and with each strategic shot, he embraced the possibility of redemption, of rewriting his story. The standoff continued, a relentless exchange echoing against the mountains. But slowly, surely, the tables turned. Tala and James had become an unyielding force, their determination and tactical prowess forcing the men to retreat. Their resolve fractured under the pressure of an unexpected defense. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the remaining light painted the land in hues of twilight. Tala and James held their ground, watching the retreating figures fade into the shadows, carrying with them the sting of defeat. Silence fell, the weight of survival settling like dust. Tala lowered her weapon, a sigh escaping her lips. Beside her, James mirrored her relief, a profound understanding shared in their quiet triumph. They had stood against the specters of their past and emerged, not just as allies, but as symbols of a new promise. In the aftermath, as stars began to prick the night sky, Tala and James looked at one another. No words were necessary. There was peace in the acknowledgement, in the silent vow that bound them forever. Under the vast western sky, amidst the enduring landscape, Tala and James forged a new path, not through words, but through the indelible mark left by courage and compassion. Their hearts, previously marred by conflict, now beat as one in a dance of redemption and hope, promising a future unbroken by discord. The sun dipped low over the western horizon, casting long shadows through the dense forests surrounding Black Creek. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the clear waters of the creek glistened like molten silver in the fading light. Here, in this secluded sanctuary, Tala and James stood together, caught in a profound moment of silence and reflection. For days, Tala and James had fought against the world, against the echoes of their pasts, and against the deadly threat that loomed. But now, with the danger temporarily at bay, they found themselves facing something far more formidable, the complexities of their own hearts. Tala turned her gaze towards James, studying him with a mix of curiosity and caution. The lines etched on his face told stories of battles and burdens, of a life she had been taught to fear and despise. Yet there was something more, something human and raw, that resonated with her own spirit. James, feeling the weight of her gaze, met her eyes. He saw not an adversary, but a mirror reflecting his own search for redemption. In the depths of her eyes, he found both the pain of a grievous past and the hope of a different future. The realization struck him with a profound sincerity that words failed to capture. Their evenings unfolded in shared silence, broken occasionally by the crackling of their campfire or the distant howl of a wolf. Tala would tend to the fire, her movements graceful and deliberate, while James assisted with an earnestness that transcended the barriers of language. Their communication was primarily nonverbal, subtle gestures, a nod, a smile, and yet it was rich and nuanced. Tala began teaching James the ways of the land, the language of the winds, the secrets of the plants, and the whisperings of the animals. She showed him how to read the signs of nature, which trees offered shelter, and which leaves could heal wounds. Despite his initial clumsiness, James was a willing student, eager to absorb the wisdom she imparted. In return, James shared tales of his own world, of battles fought on distant fields and landscapes, far removed from the quiet beauty of Black Creek. He talked about the ambitions and mistakes that brought him to this place, and the growing sense of belonging that tugged at him, a feeling he had never anticipated. As they shared these parts of themselves, an unspoken bond formed, a connection rooted not in their differences, but in what they wished to leave behind. Their scars, both visible and hidden, became points of understanding rather than division. One evening, as the stars sprinkled the night sky like diamonds set against velvet, Tala handed James her most cherished possession, a small, intricately carved totem. Its surface was worn smooth from years of handling, depicting a bare symbol of strength and healing. Her gesture was one of profound trust, an offering of her own story and heritage. James accepted it with reverence, feeling the weight of its significance. In exchange, he offered Tala a silver locket, a family heirloom he had carried through countless trials. Inside, it held a tiny portrait and a lock of hair, tokens of a life he had long left behind. These exchanges, these shared pieces of themselves, wove an intricate tapestry of connection between them. No longer were they simply allies in survival, but companions in search of peace and meaning. As the days passed into weeks, the forest itself seemed to acknowledge their transformation. Birds sang more sweetly, and the rhythmic flow of the creek was a constant companion, a soothing melody that eased away the harshness of their past experiences. Tala and James began to venture further from their camp, exploring the lush surroundings that now felt like a shared home. They discovered hidden clearings draped in wildflowers, secret pools that mirrored the skies, and ancient trees bearing witness to countless eras. With each step, the land revealed its gentle wisdom. It taught them that, like the ever-flowing creek, life was bound to continue carrying along both its current troubles and the seeds of new beginnings. In the heart of their shared journey, a realization dawned upon them, a simple but powerful truth. They were more than the sum of their histories. Within their souls lay a capacity for compassion and understanding that transcended the rifts of culture and past grievances. One afternoon, while resting on a sun-warmed boulder beside the creek, Tala turned to James with newfound resolve in her eyes. Her voice, soft yet unyielding, broke the tranquil silence. "We cannot change what happened," she said, her words carrying the weight of forgiveness and hope. "But we can choose what we become." James nodded, his heart swelling with gratitude and humility. "Maybe we can find a way forward together," he replied earnestly. In that moment, a pact was formed, not one bound by ceremony or proclamation, but by the silent, enduring promise of their intertwined futures. Under the vast expanse of the western sky, Tala and James grasped the fragile threads of their shared humanity, forging a new promise in the fabric of their lives. As evening descended upon the tranquil landscape once more, their presence was but a whisper in the vastness of the wilderness. Yet it was a whisper imbued with the power to heal, to redeem, and to shape the embers of a brighter future. In the enduring embrace of the land, Tala and James found more than solace, they found each other. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched across the rugged landscape of Black Creek. Tala and James stood side by side, their silhouettes merging against the backdrop of the vast western sky. It was a moment of quiet reflection, a pause in the whirlwind of events that had brought them together and reshaped their lives. Tala looked at James, her eyes reflecting both the ambers of the sunset and the flicker of something new, hope. Their journey from enemies to allies, and finally to something more profound, had been as arduous as it was enlightening. Now, standing in the tranquil dusk, they acknowledged the promise they silently shared, one forged not with words, but through mutual understanding and shared trials. James shifted slightly, still conscious of the ache in his side, where bullets had once torn his flesh. He had been a soldier, a man of war, taught to see life in stark contrasts of right and wrong, friend and foe. But Tala had been a revelation, her presence, a gentle whisper, challenging those rigid definitions. Her resilience and compassion had stitched together the raw wounds of his past, guiding him toward a future he hadn't dared to envision. "Look at the sky," James. Tala spoke softly, her voice blending with the evening breeze. "It carries the stories of the old and the new, just as we must." James nodded, understanding her words beyond their literal meaning. "The West," he replied. "It changes a man. Not just the land, but the spirit." He paused, the enormity of his confession hanging in the air. "I owe you more than my life, Tala. I owe you my soul." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, any lingering doubt dissipated. They knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The world around them was still rife with prejudice and pain. James had responsibility's duty to a country that had once demanded his sword. Tala had the ever-present memory of her lost tribe, but together they envisioned a path that defied their respective histories, one that embraced peace over conflict, love over fear. As night descended, they began to prepare for the journey ahead. Tala gathered her few belongings into a leather satchel, a worn hunting knife, a small earthen pot, and a piece of eagle feather, a talisman once gifted by her father. Each item was a piece of her past, but also a symbol of strength and continuity. James, too, took stock. His cavalry uniform lay discarded, replaced by simple leather and cotton clothes that spoke more of freedom than allegiance. He reached for the Colt revolver Tala had once wielded, understanding its significance. It was both a weapon and a testament to their shared struggle. Carried not for violence, but as a reminder of what they had overcome, they set out as dawn broke, the rising sun casting golden light over the landscape. Their destination was a small settlement on the other side of the mountain, a place where they hoped to find work, community, and perhaps acceptance. It was a tentative step toward a future neither had dared to dream for themselves, a life built together, rid of the burdens their pasts had placed on them. As they walked, Tala spoke of her childhood, her voice carrying tales of the land, the wisdom of elders, and the dances beneath the stars. James listened, enraptured, each story an ember illuminating the unseen facets of the world he thought he knew. He, in turn, shared his own tales of his family back east, the rolling hills of Virginia, and the poetry he loved but rarely spoke of. It was through these stories that they continued to bond, weaving together their disparate lives into one shared tapestry. Days turned into weeks as they journeyed, each step bringing them closer to their destination and each passing moment strengthening their bond. They faced challenges: harsh weather, scarce food, and the inevitable encounters with others who viewed their union with disdain. Yet, through it all, they remained as constant as the North Star, guided by the promise they had forged that night by Black Creek. As they finally approached the settlement, nestled in a fertile valley blooming with spring's promise, they paused to take in the view. It was a modest town, a patchwork of wood and brick buildings with bustling streets and market stalls. For the first time, Tala and James saw not the rugged frontier, but a place of potential, a canvas upon which to paint their future. They entered the town cautiously, aware of the curious and sometimes hostile stares that came their way. But as they moved through the streets, hand in hand, their resolve never faltered. Word of their unexpected pairing preceded them. Tala, the solitary native woman, and James, the reformed cavalryman. Whispers followed them, some questioning, others hopeful, a few supportive. Their first stop was the local inn, a modest establishment run by a kind-hearted woman named Ella. She looked them over with a discerning yet gentle eye, sensing the gravity of their journey. "You're looking for work, or just passing through?" she asked, a touch of southern warmth in her voice. "Work," James replied. "We're looking to make a fresh start." Ella nodded, a knowing smile gracing her lips. "Well, there's plenty to be done around here. Folks might stare now, but give 'em time. Hearts soften quicker than you think." Her words were a bomb, promising that acceptance was possible. As the days in the settlements stretched into months, Tala and James established themselves within the community. James took on work as a blacksmith's assistant, his strength and precision an asset to the town's modest industry. Tala offered her knowledge of herbal medicine, tending to the ailments of the locals with remedies passed down through generations. Slowly, they carved a niche for themselves. Their determination, kindness, and unwavering support for one another began to dispel skepticism, replacing it with respect and friendship. In time, a small cabin on the outskirts became their home. It was a humble dwelling, but it was theirs, a testament to their journey and their indomitable spirit. Together, under the vast western sky that had witnessed their transformation, Tala and James lived out their days. Their promise fulfilled a silent vow written not only upon the land but within their hearts. In this new beginning, they found what they had always sought but never expected: redemption, peace, and a love that transcended time and space, binding them to a future that honored the past but was unbounded by it. Here, in the whispers of the West, their tale of redemption bloomed, a testament to what could be achieved when two souls, so different yet so deeply connected, dared to dream beyond the horizon.